Welcome to the Leading Woman Show. Globally, women do not have fair representation in politics and leadership. So much so that a unified voice cries out in almost every country of the world for affirmative action for women. In Nigeria, women have always been in the public domain, starting from as far back as the pre-colonial period, where women played significant political and social-cultural roles in their different societies. From the north to the south, from the east to the west of the country, women participated at different degrees in the decision-making process alongside men. However, this is not the case today. Women are being sidelined and continue to struggle to take a seat at the table. Now, more than ever, we need to showcase women in active public service as evidence that women's leadership completes the political equation. Hello and welcome to the Leading Woman Show, the election series, brought to you with support from the National Endowment for Democracy. I'm Adesina Otubajob, and today we will be discussing a very, very important subject titled In the Public Eye. And I will be speaking to two amazing guests here with me in the studio. First is Adesina, who is the Executive Director, Finance and Administration of the Nigerian Ports Authority. Adesina was the head of corporate and investment banking research at Stanbic IBTC Bank and was the former Commissioner, Budget and Planning in Ogun State. Welcome, Adesina. We also have with us in the studio Adesina Otubajob, who is the Senior Special Advisor on Special Duties to the Governor of Ogun State. She's a fashion mogul, the creative director of Milola Group, and was the winner of Sisioge Beauty Pageant in Lagos State. Welcome, Daniela. I'm sure that you cannot wait to have this conversation. And again, we're going to be talking about in the public eye, how critical is the role of women in active service. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. All right. Thank you so much, really, and Damala, for being here. So we're talking about a really, really important topic today. In the public eye. And we don't mean to put you under pressure, but we want to have a conversation about, that journey and what that looks like. And really, let me start with you. So can you tell us a little bit about your sojourn to public service? Because, as we saw, you were in banking.
I was.
So how did that happen?
I was. It was... I started my professional career in banking in the UK, and then I continued it here. But I'd always had a sense of responsibility for how my country turns out. I couldn't really explain it, but I would say from my early 20s, I kind of had that desire. And of course, you're working in banking, and really your objective is to make money for your bank, for your clients, and when you live in the context of a developing country, it just didn't seem like enough. But I had no plan other than that sense on the inside that I needed to engage differently. And I just kind of believe that, the Lord orders one's footsteps, because I had a series of sort of chance conversations in a particular season in my life. And somebody just asked me to, they needed 5 names. So I actually gave my name to help the person that needed to make 5 names. I really wasn't thinking about anything beyond that. I was actually planning to take a sabbatical so that I could figure out how to engage better. And basically within 2 weeks of submitting my CV, I was a commissioner. So I didn't have time to think about whether I wanted to do it or not, whether I was the right fit, whether I was concerned about being in public sector. And many of my friends told me afterwards that they really didn't think that I was going to make it. But I did. And I actually had a great time, and I realized that it was exactly what I needed to be doing at that point, because it gave me the deeper engagement with my context that I was looking for. I think the fact that I didn't have time to dwell on it was actually helpful, because going into government, being a commissioner, being a single woman that sort of doesn't look very madame-ish, it was all a thing, but I didn't dwell on it. So I kind of just focused on the privilege that I had and the what it would take to sort of deliver in that environment. And I think being authentic is extremely important, so that you have an inner compass on how you navigate even an unfamiliar terrain.
Right.
Now I'm in a federal institution, and that's different. I feel like being in the state government was like undergrad.
And now you're in postgrad.
Yes. Now I'm in postgrad. But it's all about, life is a journey. So I see this as another season of learning and growing, understanding different dynamics that I wouldn't ordinarily have been exposed to at the state level. And I'm just trying to be true to myself as I navigate them. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that. Damla, what's your story, and how did you sojourn into
politics?
Into public service?
It's very interesting. I didn't think I found myself in a public space by accident. It wasn't on a whim. It was a thought that I'd carried with me for many years. And it was part of the thing that influenced my taking a job with civil service. I was, first of all, a civil servant. And I was clear I wanted to do 5 years. And then I pulled out and did my private business. And then I chose to go back into service in the capacity of running for an office. So for me, my journey's been mine, pretty much. And I choose the path I followed. There's no doubt that you're going to find things that you didn't anticipate. I didn't think I was going to be a political appointee. I was running for a legislative post. Because for me, I wanted to be in control and in charge of my own outcome. But then life has a way of telling you that, no, you still need to learn. You still need to go to school. Just like she said, the state work was like an undergrad, and being at the federal is like a postgrad. For me, I was having a conversation with some people at the back. I said, leadership, just like a lot of other responsibility, especially politicking, is a calling. A lot of people do not know.
Sorry to cut you, Damla, but I've never heard a man say that.
It's a calling.
That is a calling.
Yes, it is.
And that's why it's really important. I'm sorry I had to cut you there, but I've never, ever heard a man say that leadership is a calling for him. So please go ahead.
They know, they just don't know that they know. You would never respond to it if there's no inner impulse, just like she talked about the inner compass, the guides and direct our affairs. You would always know that. It just sits well with you. You can't really explain holistically as to why you're doing it, but it just feels right.
There's a desire.
So for me, there's that desire beyond. Someone was asking me, why would you want to run for office? I said, I believe I have what it takes. I have the desire to serve. And beyond that, I can learn and become a better person on account of service. I'm willing to throw myself in the process and learn and fail and get better. So it has to be that you're willing to step out of the comfort zone and step into a territory that is labeled strongly for man, and still think that, unlike a lot of people, I do not think women are endangered. I think women are actually more privileged in the political space, considering that the quality of women in the political space are not strong enough. So it gives us an opportunity to actually have a chance to step out when you really choose to do it.
I hear you. And I think we'll come to that.
That's okay.
But really, let me ask you a question. So you finally find yourself in public service. To Damilola's last point, you're representing 49% of the country's population because there's not that many in the public eye. Do you feel a burden to perform because you know that the way you perform is how they will perceive your
Absolutely.
entire gender.
Yes and no. If I sort of go back a little bit, I was born in England. I grew up in England, and I spent a large part of my life, especially from my teens, being in places where I wasn't expected to be. Whether it be my boarding school where there's like 5 black children in the whole school, or whether it's working in the financial services where you're on a trading floor with very few women and even fewer black ones. You know what I mean? So there's an inner fortitude that kind of journey gives you, where you realize that you have to navigate by really being in touch with who you are. And not being steered by, the sort of outer winds. I mean, I'm not saying you ignore those things, but they cannot be primary.
Right.
And I actually think that sometimes when we have these conversations, we end up sort of discussing it in terms of women versus men. And in reality, we need women and men. And it's about recognizing that. There's something that the nation loses. There's something that any institution loses when they don't have female representation, because there's a perspective, there's an instinct, there's an intuition, there's a lens that they just will not have. I mean, I'll give an example. I remember when I was in state government, we were having a conversation in EXCO about something related to sort of education and primary school children and so on. And there was I think there was a federal program to really push nutrition for under 5s or primary school kids. And it may have been in the context of the school feeding program conversation. And, it became clear in the course of the conversation that for, a man, and in this case, the governor, he's thinking, okay, we want to build schools, or we want to, have the physical assets there. But the instinct that, okay, fine, we can build these schools, but if children are going to school on empty stomachs, then you don't get the dividend of that expenditure. And instinctively, a woman would probably think about that far more readily than a man would. And it's not because you need both. So, I think that, so it's very important that we recognize that when we're discussing this. And then ultimately, what stands the test of time is, what is right and what is just. And it doesn't really matter who's peddling it. So whether you're male or female, you kind of have to be pursuing that. So that's my view on the matter.
Being right and being just, and that fairness. So what would you say to that? Do you carry a burden right now? You're in the public eye, in public service, that you're representing? Because like you said, the fact that there are few women gives opportunity. But if those few women don't do well,
they're going to have to answer to the rest of the women.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt that I feel that women are under pressure. There's there's an anticipation that how much can a woman do? We are already dealing with a lot of stereotype. We're not expected to be as all of that. But then it goes down to part of what she said. We all carry the male and the female gene in us inherently. And naturally, women need to understand that the expectation that is expected of us is not just about the female gender. But does it mean that we do not feel the pressure? Of course, there's a pressure to be like the representative of the female, and whatever it is that you do project on other women, you're going to be a reference point mainly for the negative. More than for the positive. If you do right by the people, they say, yeah, she did it. Yeah, it's okay. But if you do something contrary to what is expected of you, you're going to come under heavy criticism. And this is part of the pressure where women are literally walking on eggshell, trying to make sure that they put the best of themselves to bear. But then it doesn't allow you to really function fully in the real sense when you think that there's a script or there's a manual you're supposed to run by and there's an expectation of you. And because you also want to prove to yourself, because there's a lot of inner struggle. There's a common wound that we women share that we're not aware of. Even your fellow woman is expecting you to check on the job. There's still a bit of internal crisis amongst the women ourselves that has nothing to do with men. If you see any woman advancing politically, it's probably because man gave her a chance. Not necessarily
in the
because,
Nigeria of today.
yes, in this country
unfortunately.
where we are.
And that makes sense because the power is with the men.
Not
So
that.
oftentimes.
I do not think that it's because the power lies with men. I think we've naturally surrendered custody of our life to people by failing to understand that we all have a role to play. And there's a common wound, like I said, that we all carry. The sense of inadequacy. We're not supposed to do so much, or we're supposed to surrender custody of authority and leadership to men. That conditioning that runs across board makes even another woman look at another woman. Why would you run for an office as lofty as that?
I hear you.
Even if you want to do it, what happens to you starting with? These were the things that I had to deal with from a woman, from women. Why are you not running for a councillor? Why are you not doing a local government chairman? Why do you think that you want to start your political journey and you want to just run for House of Representative? We do not even think we deserve what we desire.
I hear you. I hear you. So what I hear you say is that there's a general conditioning, and really this is for those of us who grew up in Nigeria, right? There's a general conditioning.
Well, it's kind of exported too.
That you can go this far, but
And
not that far.
Don't touch that.
And so when I see my fellow woman trying to go farther and questioning,
we literally project our inadequacy and our sense of limitation on other people.
Right.
And we think that because, how dare you think that, not because of that person, but because of you. The world is a mirror. You see people as you are, not as they are. There's that conditioning that limits our chances to really advance as a group and as a gender.
collective.
Absolutely.
That's really interesting. So really, you're now in the limelight. I've heard stories about women in public service. And actually, we've had many examples of women actually making it to public service, but not staying and not being sustained in public service. And there are many things that cause this. So from your experience, what are the, I almost want to say what are the demons, but how do you manage that limelight? Because I think to your point, you said you didn't have time to think about it, you just jumped.
Yeah.
But when it started unraveling, did you used to hide? I've heard all sorts of things about coping strategies.
Yeah.
So what was yours like?
To be honest, I'm actually a pretty private person. So I'm not somebody who is gratuitous about being in the limelight, as it were. It's not something I need to have, but I will embrace it to the extent that I need it to do, my job. I think there's no doubt that, being in those environments will bring everything that's in you to the fore. So if you have insecurities that you've not addressed, you're going to have to address them now, or you're going to explode. Exactly. I mean, in my case also, I was, in the States. I remember when I joined, we had 3 weeks to send the budget to the House. And so it was, sleepless nights and, I working on this budget, working on a budget speech. And then we had this town hall. And so I looked at, the last one and, looked at the welcome address and how it was done, wrote mine and everything. So I went up there, did it. And then I got back to the table and my boss said I should go back and speak to them in Yoruba. Sure. So I was like, well. But the funny thing, I guess the expectation was because of the way that I speak English that I couldn't speak, and I could. So I went and I did it. But it became a thing. Like every year at the town hall, we'd have this thing. I'd do my English bit, then I'd have a little, Yoruba mix, Yoruba banter, But those things, it was like in the moment, I could get all self-conscious and think, oh, I really don't want to do this, or you just go with it. And, for that, I would say that, everyone has seasons in secret before you are brought to the fore. And if you skip those seasons and you skip the work that happens in those seasons, it's very tough when you come to the public. So sometimes people crave the limelight, but they don't understand that everything is under the microscope in the limelight. So if you haven't addressed certain inner demons, then you probably should do that first.
Right.
Because, one thing I think we have seen in our environment is that it's very unforgiving of women. There are things that men do sun up to sundown
and they get away
in
with
this environment of ours. And it's not even news. But if a woman does it, then it's like she's some sort of she-devil. So we don't actually look at the behavior generically. We look at it in the context of gender, which we really should not do. And part of that, I think, is because there's so few women. When there are more, then that sort of must recede as a discussion point. In my view.
Absolutely. Tamla, what would you say? So you're in the limelight. How are you managing that? How are you coping? What are you doing?
Well, for me, I believe women that struggle to stay on the job, just like your concern was, why is it that women don't get to run the entire length of space? It's largely because of why they do it. A lot of the time, people get into stuff without having clarity as to why you're running for office or why you're in the public space or why you're going into government or being in a position of leadership. Before I embarked on the journey, I had to sit down and be clear, anticipate every struggle and challenge that I have to deal with in the course of that journey and prepare myself for the worst case scenario. And that way, it never gets there. Because I think when you really think about things, you're better prepared.
You mitigate for them.
For me, women that get into politics sometimes are not adequately prepared. A lot of factors drive inclusion in governance. Perhaps it's the need to welfare, sustenance, the need to develop themselves or to belong to a group. So when you're not properly grounded and you've not gone through the different phases of understanding the journey you're embarking on, you can easily get eroded with a storm when it happens, because you would always have times when you would second guess yourself and doubt whether you're on course, or some things would happen and you think, is this a sign for me to get away from this? Yeah. Or is this a sign for me to stay the course? So it goes down to understanding your why, understanding your assignment, seeing every challenge as part of it. And then, because for me, I'm still going to touch on women working together to ensure that we synergize and we strengthen our forces as a gender. We would continue to need to do that. And it's just about not playing lip service to women in politics groups and all of that, but really being able to take up another young person that you see struggling or running foul, and then call that person to understand, I think you're running it wrong. And if you continue on this pace, you're going to run yourself into a ditch. Rather than watch and wait for them to fail.
To fail. This is a good time to take a break, and we'll continue the discussion when we get back. Welcome back to the show. We're talking to two amazing guests, and we're talking about being in the public eye. So really, let me come to you. You've been in the public eye. What would you say your greatest challenges have been and your greatest achievements?
My greatest challenges. I think if I think about challenge, it's actually about staying up there in terms of output, activity, performance, like every single day for like a 4-year period. My governor was very, we worked hard, but he worked harder, so, we kind of agreed that he was a workaholic, but that meant that we had to keep up. Lots of time on the Lagos Ibadan, lots of sort of early mornings, late nights, doing things in a very compressed time frame. When I finished in office, I sort of came back to Lagos, and I couldn't step down. I had to travel. I couldn't just I just couldn't unwind. So I think that was the difficult thing. And I used to I'd be in Ogun State from Monday to Friday, and I'd come to Lagos at the weekends, which was something, of course, that my principal frowned upon because, he felt we should just stay. But, I used to come to Lagos for the weekends. So that cycle every single Monday morning of getting up super early, packing your stuff up again, going for Exco, and just getting into the week. So I think that was probably the most difficult part. The days were varied, the jobs were varied, things would come up. So you're sort of operating quite intensely for a period. My biggest achievements were really job related in terms of things that I was able to achieve. The most significant thing being a program that we did with the World Bank for the state, which really took me to my last day in office. I mean, the day before I left office, I was in Abuja, working on this thing. And then also, I think I positively impacted my staff, because those are things I feel that nobody can take away. I'll not forget going to a wedding for one of my staff after I'd left. I'd probably been out of office for about 2 years. And, someone from the current administration basically said to me that, normally civil servants, if they don't like you, once you're out of office, they just don't mind you, basically. But he could see the interaction, and people were bringing their babies, and everyone was very excited, and I wasn't even really thinking about it, but it spoke to my successor. Right. He noticed it, and when he said what he said, it which was basically that he hopes he gets the same honor. It meant a lot to me, because it meant that engaging with people as people, despite the differences in our backgrounds, it had an impact, and I was happy about that.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. All right, so
my challenges
and achievements.
Well, I would say more about, because I'm just getting started. Yes. I'm just warming up. It's a bit too early to start counting milestones of achievement, but every journey has its peculiarity, and we must learn to celebrate even our smallest feat. So for taking the boldness to run and to get something out of running in a very short time that is not conventional, it's an achievement for me.
Absolutely.
It means I was visible, and I was able to prove that I mean business. Because for people to consider giving you an appointment just running within the space of 6 to 8 months, show that you've been able to demonstrate the can-do spirit.
Capacity.
Now, meeting up to that challenge or to that task is a different conversation entirely. Part of my challenges would be switching roles. Life is about role playing. And when you have to switch between a working person and a politician, and being able to blend and adapt to the environment and the climate you find yourself is a very tough thing. Sometimes I have to check myself and think, am I acting out of character? Because you would literally understand the pressure. Part of what you talked about, you want to do right by people. You don't want to be seen as a cocky. You've got chip over your shoulder because you think you're learned. You're coming to come and play grassroots politics.
Just out of curiosity, do you think that men wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to try and behave myself. I'm not going to talk too much. I'm not going to...
No. Why do we women?
Not women? Why do we put that pressure? So society puts pressure on us because we're in the public eye, and then we layer that pressure on ourselves.
Yeah.
We absorb it because women naturally internalize things. It's only a few of us that are very expressive without caring about the consequence of it. A woman naturally is very cautious, very set. She wants to put herself in a particular way, just like now we were sitting on the set and we're trying to be very prim and proper. You would always find the pressure to do right by people and to meet a particular standard, which is actually not written, but you just somehow know that so much is expected of you because you're not in the public eye. And it can be a bit of a burden and it can be overwhelming. So sometimes I have to tell myself, Damilala, just pace yourself. You're doing so much and you want every aspect of life not to suffer. You have to understand that you're not going to be able to keep juggling this ball at the same pace every single time. So it's quite a challenge. Blending life, blending businesses, blending family, blending a lot of
roles.
responsibility, role playing and switching between the gears. You know, sometimes I have to catch myself. Have I spoken with my daughters today? Hey, let me quickly do my. You will naturally feel guilty for getting so absorbed in work because you're trying to perform to par or you're trying to surpass expectation. So really for me, that's a bit of a challenge that goes on in that space.
Yeah.
The success, I would say, hey, I'm still on point.
Yes, you're still,
I'm still
on
running.
course.
I'm still running. And I
Yes.
think that for me, when I start my journey, I look at the fact that I moved from point A to point B. Thumbs up, babe. You're doing well.
Absolutely.
You're not where you're going, but you're not where you used to be. And that for me is enough for me to say.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So before we go to the audience, we know that there are double standards, really. How did you manage and how do you manage double standards? As much as we want to be prim and proper, we want to apply, wisdom, all these things. How do you manage double standard, in your role while you're in public service?
Well, to be honest, I think I try not to dwell on it. Our society is particularly patriarchal versus, the UK. So, I mean, you have all sorts of experiences that are really just because you're a woman, and people don't feel the need to restrain themselves. Something as basic as being in an environment, somebody finds you attractive, they feel entitled to hit on you. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I mean,
Yeah.
and it's like, this is totally inappropriate. But you still have to have this diplomatic and wise conversation about why you're not interested.
So you have to be intelligent
Yes.
about your response
Yes, you
for
do.
someone hitting on you.
You do. I mean, and to be honest, in fairness, that's not just in the public sector. It's everywhere. I experience the same thing in banking too. So, people feel entitled to engage with you in a certain way. I think that I sort of started off being much more sensitive to the fact that I would walk into an environment and, my colleagues would quickly say, oh, this is the commissioner, so that you don't think, oh, she's just one of our
like she's the
girls.
secretary.
They had to quickly introduce
So
you.
they go ahead of you.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that would happen a lot. And I used to sort of get really offended at the sort of, the sort of first line disrespect. And, in various senses. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. This was so funny, and it happened quite early on in my time. So we had an event in the state. It was when Ogun State turned 40. It was big to do. The president was coming and everything. And we were going into the stadium. And I had arranged for some food to be brought. And the person who had brought it was a bit sort of... So I went to attend to them and make sure they could get in. So I broke off with the group. And then I said, oh, where are we supposed to sit? As in, where are the commissioners sitting? And the person said to me, hey, baby girl. And I was like, okay. So when I got to my seat, I said to my colleagues, can you imagine that this person just said this to me? So it became like a running joke. But so those things used to offend me, in the early days. But after a while, I just thought, okay, if I keep getting offended by this, I'm going to have someone else set my mood and set my day and set my responses, which I don't want. So I just learned not to internalize a lot of the things that are somebody else's problem.
Right.
Damilola talked about, people seeing the world as you are, not as it is. So if you feel that I'm inferior, that's your issue.
Yeah.
I know that I'm not. So I just learned not to take personally any disrespect that you might give me. And I don't necessarily even always react to it. I've learned that there's always an opportunity to set the record straight. And I prefer to do that on my terms rather than reacting to your behavior.
At the instant.
Yeah.
Very good.
Samuel, what would you say?
That's a very good way to take, and I'll take a note from that. Because sometimes I want to just set you straight.
Yeah.
I get the part where people have double standard. Because there's a programming, everything goes to me is a programming. There's a hardwire script we're all running on autopilot without even knowing it.
Yes.
You move from point A to point B, you won't have to think about it. You just do it because you've been doing it for so long. So sometimes when people raise double standard, they're not even aware that they are running a double standard event. And for me, I just learned to elevate. Sometimes I say to myself, Damilola, there's not much you can do about it. This is just how it is. So like she said, do you want to respond, which is positive, or do you want to react, which is negative? You're going to have to choose your responses. But sometimes I really feel the need to say, me perform nonsense in the real sense. Like, what do you think you're doing? And part of the double standard I find in the system is thinking that age has anything to do with competence and capacity. A lot of the time, there's a stereotype and a hardwired conditioning that until you're a particular age or in a particular status, you're not supposed to handle some responsibility. It doesn't matter how sound you present your case. You just do not fit that brief. And that, for me, is a big problem. But then I say, what are we going to do about it? It's one thing to identify a problem. It's another thing to say, now what? What are we going to do about it? And for me, we have to just keep on pushing. There's a programming that is running this particular manifesto and behavior. What do we then do? Einstein says the level of thinking that has created this problem cannot be the same thinking that will sustain it.
Absolutely.
And for me, I believe the only way you can change a system that is running on a wrong, faulty system is to introduce a superior one.
That's right.
And that is why I'm an advocate for don't just complain about what is going wrong. Take an active step and take a position. And don't just talk about it. Step in. The more people we have addressing some of these issues, the less we can reduce the barrier to dealing with double standard and the situation where we're going to have one woman facing the multitude of people who think, you're a woman, you're a single mother, you're not qualified, you're not 40, you're not even 50 years. How dare you think you want to be a governor of a state? We're going to have to continue to deal with that. The more we play a docile and dormant role.
Fantastic. That's a good time to take a break, and we'll continue when we get back. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Leading Woman Show. We're now going to go to the audience and take a question or two. Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. I was listening very well to the discussion, and I heard you say, when you want to take decision, it's just all about what is right and just. And then as a single mother, like you said, being a commissioner, and you are at the verge of you're taking a position in the midst of men, and you're putting your feet down, and then you're going to have this man that will say, why is she insisting that we do it this way? Oh, this one doesn't have a husband at home. Maybe that's why. So how did you cope with this stigmatization that, oh, I'm a commissioner and this is what I stand for and that is just and right. And then you don't have the voting of everybody around you to agree with what decisions that you are taking that you know is right and just. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think one of the very important things, when you enter these environments is, you kind of have to be comfortable in your own skin and recognize that actually respect is something that in any context is earned. Sometimes, there's a measure of respect that comes for the office. But those around you, they're also watching. They're looking at your consistency. They're looking at your decision-making processes. Are you partial? Are you indulgent? Do you apply things, partially? You say this for A, but not for B. All of those things over time. And I think, there's no escaping moments of testing. because we want to sort of be in a situation where we've arrived on this seat and everything is just, but there will always be moments of testing, because you see that resistance it brings about confrontation. And when there's confrontation, the point is, what are you going to do? You know, sometimes we shrink back because of cowardice, because we don't want to have an argument, or we don't want to speak up, or we don't want, and everybody does this, male and female, but women perhaps more so. And there's a discomfort. Damilola spoke earlier about coming out of your comfort zone. You know, you come to a place that you have to have those inner conversations that, okay, why am I shrinking back from this? What am I afraid of? And you have to address it such that when those situations come, you know, you are prepared to assert yourself, and you've thought about, you know, the things that are at your disposal to back the position that you're taking. Because sometimes you have to use the hammer. Sometimes you use persuasion. But it's, if you use the hammer because you're insecure and you want to prove that you have a hammer, then it probably will not end well. But if you use the hammer because in this instance the hammer needs to be used, then everyone around you will recognize that, okay, this was a hammer situation, and you know, you kind of move through it. So it's really about being authentic. It's about you know, addressing your internal insecurities and being prepared to follow your instincts and to not always be in your comfort zone. Everybody likes to be liked. Everybody likes people to smile at them and applaud. But sometimes you take a position, you're not moving, and you're not going to do so even if not everybody is happy. You're not changing. But, you know, you have to be resolved on the inside for you to be resolved on the outside.
Sama, I don't know if you want to add anything to that before we take our final thoughts.
Well, just to drop in a few, for me, there are two types of leadership. Leadership by force and leadership by consent of followers. I like to find a fine balance between the two, because it's about having the emotional intelligence to understand when there's an act of insubordination going on, or it's just a difficult situation. People that apply a bit too much force, they lose the respect of their followers. And people that apply too much of yes person, they also lose the respect of their followers. You need to be able to find a fine balance between being empathic and being firm, understanding that you're not going to be able to please everybody, and you need to understand that there's an hierarchical structure. And people need to know that even in heaven, there's the hierarchy of beings. Establishing the boundaries, establishing the rules, establishing the structure, letting people know that it doesn't matter if I'm a woman or I'm 30 or 40, age doesn't matter. The fact is, I have earned this position
to be here.
Irrespective of your personal opinion, then I have to be able to demonstrate capacity also to manage and to navigate different challenges. For me, it's the intelligence and the emotional intelligence to be able to manage those issues. So,
fantastic. Our time is up, unfortunately, but I want to give you 1 minute. How can women pursue their ambition in public service unapologetically? 1 minute,
unapologetically.
Unapologetically. 1 minute, please.
Well, you know, in the end, you know, our lives, God created us. He's the one who gives us purpose. And if we recognize that in the end we're going to give an account to him, then you kind of move past all of those external factors that may want you to shrink back. You know, shrinking back from who you are leads to regret, leads to, you know, a lack of fulfillment. It leads to frustration. And the risks associated with being who you are far less than the risks associated with walking somebody else's path, in my view. So
fantastic.
Be a peacock sometimes. God made peacocks too.
Okay, I like that. So, Damilola, what would you say? 1 minute, please.
I don't know if it was well, if you have to live your life to prove a point, you're going to have to keep catching up with a lot of issues. One thing I took away from my sister is authenticity. You have to, first of all, understand who you are and why you do it. We all have different temperaments. And being comfortable to accept me for me.
Yeah.
Every time I struggle to overcome my weaknesses, not understanding that it's a yin-yang. The positives are there, the negatives are there. First of all, accept you as you are, and then run your life show on your account, understanding that there are consequences for every action.
Every action.
So the moment I come to terms with, this is my choice, this is my life, this is my script, and this is what I'm running with, I must be willing to live with the consequence of my decision. So with that, I can run my life.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic conversation. I want to thank my incredible speakers for a thoughtful and enlightening discussion. Keep a date with us because next week we'll be back talking about another fascinating subject with other wonderful guests. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to shout out a leading woman you know and tag us so we can celebrate her too. Until next time, remember that women's leadership can change everything, everywhere. I remain your host, Abosede Jojogan. Bye for now.